John was a man who had long ago been written off by the world. Years ago, he had been someone with a home, a job, and a future full of promise. But life's cruel twists had stripped him of everything he held dear. A failed business, the loss of his family to tragedy, and the crushing weight of despair had pushed him to the margins of society. Now, he lived on the streets, cold, hungry, and invisible to most. His name was known only to himself and a handful of others who wandered the same worn city blocks, clutching their few possessions close like fragile treasures. The city was a blur of faces rushing by, absorbed in their own lives, their problems, their triumphs and failures, never stopping to consider the story behind the man sitting on the bench, wrapped in a threadbare coat. Yet, despite everything, John never lost one thing: his sense of honor. It was this stubborn flicker of light that separated him from the desperation that consumed so many others. For John, integrity was a lifeline, the one piece of himself he refused to surrender no matter how bleak his existence became. Even when hunger gnawed at his insides, when the cold pierced through his clothes to his bones, when loneliness was his only companion, he held on to his dignity with a fierce grip. One autumn afternoon, when the wind blew crisp and the trees were shedding their golden leaves onto the cracked sidewalks, John found himself sitting on the same bench he had claimed for months. The city square buzzed around him. Commuters in suits, children with school bags, tourists with cameras, and street performers entertaining for spare change. Life was happening, rushing forward, unstoppable. And then, something caught his eye. Just a few feet away, resting on the ground, was a wallet. Its rich leather glistened under the fading sun like a beacon. It was thick and bulging, heavy with what John guessed was money and cards. His first thought was simple. This wallet was lost. Someone had dropped it unaware, probably frantic by now. The temptation to keep it for himself was strong. After all, how long had it been since John had seen that much money in one place? How could he resist the urge to take it? He was cold, hungry, and broken. But more powerful than temptation was something deeper, a whisper in his heart, telling him that this was not his path. John picked up the wallet with trembling hands. Opening it, he saw cash, several $100s in bills, credit cards, and an ID card that bore the name Emily Parker and an address not far from where he sat. That name, that identity suddenly transformed the wallet from a mere object to a person's life, their security, their hope. And John knew, without a doubt, that the right thing to do was to return it. John folded the wallet carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. His stomach growled, a harsh reminder of his reality, but he pushed the hunger aside. The wallet was a responsibility now. More than just an object, it was someone's lifeline, and John was determined to honor that trust. He rose slowly from the bench, his joints aching from the cold and long hours of sitting still, and started walking towards the address printed on the ID card. The city's noise grew louder in his ears, the honking of cars, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant wail of sirens. But amidst the chaos, John felt a quiet resolve settle over him. Each step was a battle against his own doubts. What if she doesn't believe me, he thought. What if she thinks I'm a thief? The fear of rejection gnawed at him, but his commitment to doing right was stronger. He was more than his circumstances. He was still a man with a conscience, with a heart. As John walked, his mind drifted back over the years that had led him here. He remembered a time when he had a family, a loving wife, and 2 children, and a job that paid the bills. But when the business failed and the debts piled up, the cracks began to show. His wife left, taking the children with her, and John found himself spiraling, unable to pull himself back. The city that had once held promise became a prison, the streets a relentless reminder of what he had lost. But through all of it, the core of who he was remained untouched. This Wyatt was a chance to prove that, even now. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, John reached a small apartment complex nestled between a row of shops. The address matched. His heart pounded in his chest as he hesitated at the door. would he say? How would he explain that a homeless man had found something so important and cared enough to bring it back? The door opened before he could knock, and a young woman stood there. Her eyes were tired but kind, her clothes worn from long shifts. She looked at John curiously, unsure what to expect. I found this," John said, holding out the wallet. His voice was rough from disuse and nerves. Emily's eyes widened as she recognized the wallet immediately. A tremor ran through her hands as she took it, checking the contents with disbelief and relief. "You found this?" she whispered. John nodded. "I wanted to make sure it got back to you." Tears filled her eyes. "You don't know how much this means to me." She motioned for him to come inside. "Please, come in. You must be cold." John hesitated but then stepped inside. The apartment was modest but clean, with signs of a small child. A toy car, a drawing taped to the fridge. Emily explained how the money in the wallet was her rent money, carefully saved over months while working 2 jobs to keep her and her daughter from becoming homeless. Losing it could have meant eviction and the loss of everything they had fought for. John listened, feeling a deep connection to this woman who was fighting her own battles. In her, he saw a reflection of himself, someone struggling to survive against overwhelming odds. That shared struggle formed a silent bond between them. Emily insisted on feeding John. They shared a simple meal of soup and bread, the warmth of the kitchen and the kindness in her eyes stirring something long dormant inside him: hope. She helped him contact a local charity that assisted homeless people in finding work and shelter. Over the next few weeks, John's life began to change. With Emily's help and the charity's support, John found a job cleaning offices during the night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. More importantly, he found a small room where he could finally sleep indoors and feel safe. His body, once bent with exhaustion and cold, began to straighten. His eyes, once dull with hopelessness, started to shine with purpose. The act of returning the wallet was a turning point not just for Emily, but for John as well. It was proof that even in the darkest times, integrity and kindness can open doors that seemed permanently closed. John's story soon spread through the city. People heard about the homeless man who chose honesty when survival tempted him otherwise. His story became a beacon of hope, inspiring others to look beyond appearances and see the humanity in everyone. John began volunteering at the charity that had helped him, sharing his journey and encouraging others to hold on to their dignity no matter how desperate things seemed. Emily and John's friendship grew into something deeper, a partnership based on respect, gratitude, and shared dreams. Together, they became advocates for the homeless, reminding the city that every person deserves a chance to rebuild their life. John's journey showed that no matter how far life knocks you down, you can rise again. That even when everything seems lost, one honest act can change the course of many lives. And that sometimes the smallest choices, a wallet returned, a meal shared, a word of kindness, carry the greatest power to heal and transform. As days turned into weeks, John's world transformed in ways he had scarcely dared to imagine. The simple act of returning a lost wallet had opened a door not only to a new chapter in Emily's life, but to his own redemption. The harshness of the streets slowly faded into the background, replaced by the warmth of a small room, the steady rhythm of work, and the nurturing light of hope. Each morning he woke with a purpose, to prove that he was more than his past, more than a label society had pinned on him. He was a man capable of honesty, courage, and compassion. John began to understand that dignity was not something given to you, but something you fight for every day. It was the pride in waking up and knowing that despite the pain and loss, you could still choose to do what was right. The charity Emily had introduced him to became a lifeline, offering not only shelter and work, but a community of people who believed in second chances. For the first time in years, John felt seen, not as a homeless man, but as a person with worth. Emily's story intertwined with his in profound ways. Her gratitude for the return of her wallet was genuine, but it was more than that. It was the belief that kindness could still exist even when the world seemed cold and indifferent. years of motherhood and financial hardship, found in John a symbol of hope that courage and integrity could overcome despair. They talked often about dreams they had once held and those they still dared to chase. She encouraged him when doubt crept in and celebrated each small victory, whether it was a day without hunger or a night of uninterrupted sleep. John's nights were long and lonely at first, but over time he built a routine. The janitorial work he did was humble, cleaning floors and emptying trash bins, but he approached it with pride. Every sweep of the mop was a step away from his past and toward a future he was beginning to believe in. His coworkers, initially wary, soon recognized the kindness in his quiet demeanor. Slowly, friendships formed. People began to ask about his story, and John shared it not for pity, but to inspire. He wanted others to know that no matter how broken they felt, they could reclaim their lives. The city itself seemed to shift as word of John's honesty spread. People who had passed him by without a glance started nodding in recognition. The story of a homeless man returning a wallet filled with hundreds of dollars became a powerful narrative, challenging stereotypes and stirring compassion. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing John as a beacon of integrity in a world often defined by cynicism and greed. But John was humble. He saw himself as an ordinary man who simply chose to do what was right, a choice he believed was available to everyone. One afternoon, Emily invited John to a small community event organized to raise awareness about homelessness. John spoke from the heart, sharing his journey, the hardships he faced, and the simple decision to return that wallet that had changed everything. His words moved the crowd, many of whom had never considered the humanity behind homelessness. He spoke of resilience, the importance of hope, and how one honest act can create ripples far beyond its origin. When he finished, there was a standing ovation, not just for the man who had returned a wallet, but for the message he carried, that kindness and integrity can be found in the most unexpected places. John's life was no longer defined by what he lacked, but by what he could give. He began volunteering regularly, mentoring others who struggled with addiction, poverty, or despair. He understood the weight of hopelessness, but also the power of compassion. He helped people find jobs, taught them how to apply for housing, and reminded them that their past mistakes did not dictate their future. Each story he touched was a reaffirmation of his own journey, proof that redemption was possible. Emily's daughter, little Mia, became a bright light in John's life. She was a lively, curious child who reminded him daily why the struggle was worth it. He watched her grow, helped with her homework, and even became a part of her bedtime stories. The bond between Emily and John deepened into something resembling family, a testament to the unexpected ways human connections heal and transform. They were no longer two strangers brought together by chance, but a team committed to helping others rise. The wallet John returned had been lost by accident, but the impact of that moment was no accident at all. It was a spark that ignited change, for him, for Emily, and for a community learning to see its most vulnerable with new eyes. John's story challenged the world's assumptions, proving that goodness can survive even in the harshest conditions, that every person carries within them the capacity for greatness. John often reflected on that day when he found the wallet. It had felt like a small act then, almost insignificant. But in the quiet moments, he realized it was the defining moment of his life. It was a testament to the power of choice, how even when everything else is stripped away, integrity remains. And that integrity, that choice, can change everything. With each passing day, John felt the weight of his past lift just a little more, replaced by a new sense of purpose. The streets that once echoed with loneliness now seemed distant, a chapter closed but never forgotten. He often thought about the fragile balance between despair and hope, how close he had come to surrendering everything, and how a single moment of honesty had redirected his life's course. John understood now that kindness was a currency far more valuable than money. It was what gave life meaning. He began to see the invisible struggles of those around him, people rushing by with their own burdens and pain. He learned that behind every face was a story waiting to be heard, a battle being fought silently. This awareness deepened his empathy and strengthened his resolve to be a force for good. Emily's faith in John never wavered. She saw in him a man reborn, not just because of what he did, but because of who he had always been underneath the hardship. Their bond grew stronger, built on shared dreams and mutual respect. Together, they started a small initiative to collect donations for the homeless, clothing, food, and even job training materials. The community began to rally around them, inspired by the story of a lost wallet and a man who chose to do right despite having so little. John's transformation became a symbol of hope throughout the city. But for him, the real victory was internal. It was waking up each morning with a heart unburdened by guilt or shame, with the knowledge that his past mistakes did not define his future. He no longer saw himself as a victim of circumstance, but as a survivor, a man who could inspire change simply by living with integrity. He continued working at the janitorial job, but he also started attending classes to improve his skills, determined to find better opportunities. The charity helped him apply for housing assistance, and slowly, John moved from a temporary shelter to a small apartment of his own. It wasn't much, but it was a place he could call home, a space where he could rebuild his life. The city, too, changed in subtle ways. Stories like John's shifted perceptions about homelessness and poverty. People became more compassionate, more willing to lend a hand or simply offer a smile. The stigma lessened, replaced by a growing understanding that anyone could fall on hard times and anyone deserved a second chance. John's life became a testament to the power of choice. That single act, returning a lost wallet, was a seed that blossomed into a movement of hope, kindness, and redemption. It was a reminder that no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes. That no matter how lost you feel, you can find your way back. Through it all, John never forgot where he came from. The streets that had once held him captive were now a reminder of his resilience. He walked them not with shame, but with pride, proof that even the most broken souls can heal. John's journey was far from easy. The scars of his past never fully faded. Some nights were still filled with loneliness and doubt. But he faced each one with newfound strength, armed with the knowledge that he was no longer alone. He had a community, friends, and a purpose that lifted him beyond survival to true living. The wallet he returned had been a catalyst, but the change came from within. His story spread beyond the city, inspiring people in neighboring towns and across the country. Letters arrived from strangers who had found hope in his example, who shared their own stories of hardship and recovery. John answered each with encouragement, urging them to hold on to their dignity and never underestimate the power of one honest act. Emily and John continued to work together, expanding their outreach to help more people trapped in cycles of poverty and despair. They organized workshops on financial literacy, job skills, and emotional wellness. They created a safe space where stories could be shared without judgment, where healing could begin. Their efforts proved that healing was not just about material support, but about restoring human connection and faith in oneself. John often reflected on how fragile life can be. A wallet lost on a city street could have meant nothing, or it could mean everything. And for him, it meant everything. It reminded him that sometimes our smallest decisions hold the greatest power. Choosing to do right, even when no one is watching, is what defines true character. His transformation also taught him forgiveness, not just of others, but of himself. For years, John had carried guilt and shame for the mistakes that had led him to the streets. But he learned that the past cannot be changed. Only the future can be built. Every day was a new chance to choose integrity, kindness, and hope. John's story is a beacon for anyone who feels broken or invisible. It proves that no matter how low you fall, you can rise again, that the human spirit is stronger than circumstance, that kindness, honesty, and courage can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes all it takes is one lost wallet and one man's choice to return it, to change everything. In the end, John was not just a man who returned a wallet. he was a man who reclaimed his life, rebuilt his dignity, and inspired a city to believe in the power of redemption. His journey was a testament to the fact that every person has worth, every life has meaning, and every act of kindness matters. And that is a story worth telling, over and over again.